Hello, my name is Nina Avatabile and I'm making a mini podcast series on behalf of the Eating Behaviour Research Group at the University of Birmingham. This is the 4th episode and today I'm joined by research fellow Maartje Spetter. Maartje completed her undergrad and masters at Maastricht University in the Netherlands, followed by her nutritional neuroscience PhD in 2012 at Utrecht University. During this time she also completed a study at Yale University. She then completed her first postdoctoral research position in Germany before joining the University of Birmingham in 2016. So welcome, Maartje. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Before we get into the research that you're currently doing, I first wanted to ask about why you think eating behaviour is interesting, why you think it's important that we study it, or how you got involved with it.
Interesting question. How I got into eating research. Eating behaviour research is actually long story. So I started out with being really interested in the human body, and I really want to know what happens in all different kinds of processes. And I didn't want to study medicine. So then there was this beautiful study, biomedical science in Maastricht, and there they studied what happens to the human body when you move, but also when you eat.
Okay.
So what actually happens when you eat certain kinds of nutrition, or lack certain kinds of nutrition, and how this influences your health.
Okay, so like body and brain, so like cognition
It
as well?
started mainly with body.
Yeah.
And the brain, I didn't really get involved in the brain until I started my PhD.
So it started like nutrition, that was
It
your
started
base.
really nutrition, metabolism. And then I slowly moved into the brain and nutrition. And from there I moved to more cognitive side and brain and nutrition. So I moved my way up slowly.
Yeah, perfect. And why do you think it's important to study this stuff today?
We all do it. We all eat. We can't do it out.
Yeah.
But with saying that, it's also one of the major causes of health problems.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, obesity and overweight are seen as an epidemic. They influence everyone's health in a negative way. And next to that, nutrition also doesn't not only has influence on diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, but also cancer, depression.
So a huge
variety.
Yeah.
Eating behavior is involved in everything, and it has a role in everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's very interesting, but also very hard to study.
Yeah, that I completely agree. So it's the two sides of the scale. You've got obesity and everything related to that, but then also eating disorders.
Fields of eating disorders.
And then people who maybe haven't been diagnosed, but they're just not getting enough nutrition in their body, and that can also lead to things. So,
or even there's still a lot of debate about it, but there's also some nutrition that's linked to get better mental health, or that it influences cancer, certain types of cancers in a certain way.
Yeah.
So nutrition is very important in daily life.
The whole spectrum. Maartje explained that research between nutrition and mental health is a hot topic within the scientific community, and more studies are currently being conducted to investigate the connection. I then asked her about things in research that had changed significantly since she started her PhD in 2012, and she spoke about the increased interest in brain research and neuroimaging.
I think in the early days, even before I started studying it, lots of was on nutrition and very simple psychology. Brain research into nutrition, so fMRI studies, slowly came start of this millennium, so in 2000. When I started my PhD in 2007, almost no one linked brain with nutrition or brain with eating behavior. That was very, very new. There were only a few labs at the time that did it in the world.
So it was cutting edge
stuff. It was very cutting edge. I think I was one of the first PhD students in the Netherlands that studied that subject. And after that, it became really hip. And nowadays, I think every week there's an fMRI paper out that's related to eating behavior. And yeah, so that really changed.
Yeah.
I still remember the first conference I went to. There was no brain imaging study, and now I still go to the conference every year, and now half of the studies are brain imaging. It's totally changed.
Yeah, I guess now that the technology is out there, the expectation for a study to include it is always becoming more and more. People want the brain imaging involved. Okay, perfect.
They hope that with the brain imaging we will understand it better,
because you'll see not only behaviourally, but then is that mirrored in the brain?
Or maybe the brain explains why certain behaviour happens.
Perfect. So that also leads on to sort of our next topic, which is I want to ask you about insulin. So most of the listeners will understand insulin as a hormone in your body. It's to do with blood sugar regulation, and they might know that diabetic people sometimes inject themselves with it if there's a need for that. But the study that we've been working on together is involved with intranasal insulin. So this is you sniff the insulin, it goes straight to the brain, and there's a lot of things that happens when insulin comes in. So it's memory, it's cognition. Could you tell a bit more about that sort of?
Sure. It's a very interesting study. We just finished it here, running it here at the University of Birmingham, and intranasal insulin is also one of the things that became a hype a bit. So I think the first studies were done in 2005, and they just looked at the effect of intranasal insulin on behaviour.
Okay.
Intranasal insulin is a way, as you just said, of delivering insulin instead of via the blood, in which way you normally get insulin or periphery. You put it in the nose, and it goes directly to your brain. So it doesn't get into your blood. And you have a lot of insulin receptors in your brain, and they automatically take up their insulin. That's the idea behind it. There are a lot of insulin receptors in your brain, on different areas. So brain areas that are related to cognition, brain areas that relate to reward, but also brain areas that are related to your homeostasis. So do you want to eat or do you not want to eat?
For any listeners who are unsure what homeostasis means, it refers to the biological processes that occur within our cells and bodies that allow us to stay balanced and healthy despite changes in the environment. Examples of this are maintaining a healthy body temperature or blood pressure, but in this podcast we are referring to homeostatic blood sugar control. Insulin, a hormone produced by the pancreas, facilitates glucose transport from the blood into cells, whereas the hormone glucagon can counteract this effect by raising blood sugar levels. I then asked Maartje about the findings from previous studies concerning the effect of intranasal insulin.
The first behavioural studies actually showed that cognition actually was changed by it. So it was an improvement in memory. There are a few studies in Germany where they showed that actually memory improves by giving insulin. And next to that, also one study actually found that people will eat less, so their food intake was reduced after insulin, and in that way they got hints that maybe insulin is not only involved in pure homeostatic eating, but also maybe in cognitive processes which are related to eating. And from there, another group in Germany actually looked at direct effects of insulin on the brain. They didn't do any behavioral things next to it, and they indeed found that giving insulin to people indeed affects cognitive and homeostatic areas in the brain, but also there's a difference between people that are lean or people that are overweight and how they react to this insulin, and also if people are insulin resistant or not. This all influences how your brain reacts to, and which areas react to insulin. And from there, we wanted to kind of like link everything together, which hasn't been done before. And what we try is to kind of like make the circle, how does insulin affect food intake through reward, cognition, and homeostatic processes in the brain? And how does this influence, what kind of behavior does that influence? And that's the question we kind of want to answer. And get a complete picture of how intranasal insulin actually affects.
And so the study that we've done a lot of getting the participants in, but we're in the process now of looking at all of the different data. So in an absolute ideal world, what would you expect to see? So memory improve and is there an ideal set of results?
Of course, there's always an ideal. Your hypotheses are always the ideal set of results, and yes, we hope that memory will improve, cognitive function will be improved.
Yeah.
Also in the brain, cognitive function will be improved, and in that way our food reward intake will be decreased.
Yeah. So they will eat less, not only will
perform better
and rate the food that they're eating as less pleasant.
Yeah,
could be. Okay.
And of course we have lean and obese people that we test, and obese people, it's a hard thing to say because a lot of people that are overweight are less sensitive to insulin. So the idea is actually that they will respond less if you give them insulin. But in addition, we also measure their insulin sensitivity, and we will want to look if there's any correlation between how sensitive people are to insulin and how they react to the intranasal insulin.
So you sort of control for that in the results,
or maybe it explains the results.
Maybe that will explain the results. Perfect. That all sounds very interesting. I'm looking forward to when those results come out. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is if all of these studies do point to the same conclusion. So if insulin, it will be study after study after study has been replicated to decrease people's intake of foods, especially highly palatable foods. So this would be more like cookies rather than sandwiches. How do you think that will equate to therapies? Will there be insulin-based therapies, or is this too expensive? Is this messing with the body too much? Will it only be for obese people? Or it's a lot of questions I've just thrown at you.
It's a difficult one, and it has multiple ways of looking at it. I always think of multiple ways. Yes, of course, if it really seems to work, you can think of therapies that include intranasal insulin if people want to lose weight, for example. However, it's maybe also very interested if it especially works on cognition and memory, that people that have Alzheimer maybe benefit from intranasal insulin. Until now, there haven't really been found any side effects.
Yeah.
However, almost no study looked at really long-term effects. So you have to start with that, because maybe if you give it long-term, your body will be met.
Or you could become dependent on it, and then if you can't afford the treatment anymore, then if that affects your memory or eating behaviour negatively.
Exactly. There's so many things that you have to think about before it actually becomes a treatment. But nowadays we mainly use it to understand
the brain.
And understand the interaction between certain hormones in the brain and how important they are, and what goes actually wrong in people with overweight or obesity, because they're not that sensitive to insulin. Yeah. Maybe that's why the brain acts a certain way. And then the question is, and the most interesting question, of course, is if people from onset, before they get obese, do they already have different brains?
It seems like what is required is big longitudinal studies. So like tracking people from before they've even got obesity, and then seeing...
That would be the most ideal. But first,
the money.
The money. And we first have to repeatedly find that really has an influence.
Yeah, perfect. Behavior. No, well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm sure the listeners have learned a lot about insulin and the effects in the body, and maybe a few misconceptions have been cleared up. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.